Happy Friday, Drew Scholars. Mr. Christian back to read you today's biography read aloud. And in today's biography read aloud, we're going to be reading about Charles Drew. Does that name sound familiar? Well, Charles Drew is the name of our school. We are named after this doctor, Dr. Charles Drew. Just to give you a brief summary of who Dr. Charles Drew was, Dr. Charles Drew was an African American doctor who helped create these places called blood banks, which are areas where people can go donate blood, and that blood can be used to save the lives of other people that maybe have really bad injuries or got into accidents. So Dr. Charles Drew helped create those areas, and those areas are still around to this day where people can go donate blood to go help save people's lives. So let's read a little bit more about his story, where he grew up, what he did, and let's get started. So our author is Katie Marsico, and our illustrator is Jeff Bain. So let's read about Charles Drew. My story. I was born in Washington, D.C. Back then, blacks didn't have the same rights as whites. Washington, D.C. is the capital of our country, just to let you know, the capital city of our country. This was the time, too, when there was still a lot of racism and discrimination, and it was hard for African Americans to have the same rights as whites. But as we read on with Dr. Charles Drew's story, we'll see that he was able to push ahead and he was able to become a doctor and make our country a better and safer place for us. So let's keep reading. I was lucky. I went to good schools. Later, I got into college. And our question here is, when do you feel lucky? Ooh, that's a great question. Our question's for you, scholars. When do you feel lucky? I'll share mine. I feel lucky when I find money on the ground. Oh no, it could be some quarters, it could be some dollars. I feel lucky when I find money on the ground. When do you feel lucky? Let's keep reading. I wanted to become a doctor. Some schools didn't take black students. I studied medicine in Canada. I learned how to do a transfusion. This gives one person's blood to someone else. So he couldn't study to become a doctor here in our country. So he went to another country called Canada, which is our neighbors to the north of our country. And he learned about transfusion, which is giving one person's blood to someone else. Let's keep reading. I returned to work in the United States. I set up a blood bank for transfusions. Here you have a picture of how a refrigerator would look like in a blood bank. All those bags are of blood ready to be given to people who are in really bad accidents, or if they're coming back from a war. This blood helps them, tries to help them survive. Soon, more blood banks formed. They were important during wars. People who were hurt needed blood. And I know that the work that Dr. Charles Drew was doing at the time in setting up these blood banks, it helped out people, it helped out soldiers that were fighting during World War II. So those blood banks helped save a lot of lives that were uh, a lot of lives of people that were coming back from the war during the time. Healthy people gave blood, but yet I couldn't at first. Blacks were told they couldn't give blood. Here's a question. What do you think about this rule? What do you think about that rule, scholars? That blacks or African Americans were told that they couldn't give blood to donate. What do you think about that? How does that make you feel? To me, it makes me feel angry because if blacks were allowed to give blood, that would be a lot more blood to save more lives of people. I spoke out for equality. I said medical schools should treat blacks fairly. And another question here is, why is fairness important? I'll read that question one more time. Why is fairness important? Ask yourself that. Why is fairness important? What does the word fair mean, scholars? To me, being fair or fairness is important because it's not okay to give some people one thing and not others another thing just because of how different they look, or maybe different, or if they speak a different language. I don't think that's okay. I think we have to be fair to everybody because we're all people, right? It shouldn't matter if we have a different color of skin or if we come from a different country or if we believe in different things. It shouldn't matter. It's important to be fair because we all deserve it. I was in a car accident. I died in 1950, but my work with blood banks saved lives. I taught others about equal rights. I showed that segregation and science don't mix. What would you like to ask me? That's the question that we have there. What would you like to ask me? What's something you would ask him, scholars, after learning a little bit more about him? About his work that he did with blood banks, fighting for equality to make sure that African Americans were able to donate blood, but then also become doctors. What would you ask Dr. Charles Drew if he were still alive today? I would ask him, why did he focus on blood transfusions? Why did he focus on donating blood? Why was it important to him? Is there something that happened when he was younger that made him want to do it when he grew up? Why did he focus on that? I know it'd be something interesting for for me to know. Like, why you as a doctor did you focus your work on donating blood? That would be my question. And here's our timeline that shows some important dates of Dr. Charles Drew's life. So he was born in 1904, which was about 200 and, oh, actually, no, I'm sorry, 116 years ago. Here in 1933, the picture of him going to study medicine in the country of Canada, where he learned about blood transfusions. Remember, blood transfusions are giving one blood from one person to another person to save their life. In 1939, this picture here, from 1939, this picture, he helped establish those blood banks around the country where people can go donate blood, and that blood can be used for people who are injured helped them save their lives. And in 1950, he died. So he was relatively young when he died. I remember him saying that. Remember in the book it said that he died of a car accident. So he was about 45, 46 years old when he died. So he was a relatively young doctor. But the work that he did was very meaningful, and it has saved a lot of lives from back then until now, because blood banks are still around. People still donate blood, and people are saved because of those blood donations. So let's go over our words in our glossary. We saw the word accident in there, and it says an unlucky and unplanned event. Remember, accidents, right? We have different types of accidents, like car accidents or accidents that happen at school or at home. We don't know that we didn't plan for it to happen, but it just happened. Accidents. A blood bank. It's a place where people go to give blood, and then that blood is stored for use later. That's a blood bank. Equality. The right of everyone to be treated the same. We have segregation, the act of treating a group of people differently or unfairly, often because of their race or religion. That's what segregation means. And the word transfusion, the act of moving blood from one person to another person who needs it. So those are our key words that we saw in this biography book. Remember, our index is a place where you can find words and the page numbers where the words are at. All right, first grade. Well, I hope you enjoyed this biography read aloud. I really do hope that you enjoyed all of the read alouds this week. I know it's completely different than reading about fairy tales and reading about all the other stuff that we would be reading, but I think it's important to also know of important people that lived in the past, and that some still live today that are trying to make our country, our world a better place, a place where people are treated fairly, and especially knowing that a lot of people of color, like the people that we read about this week, are able to make positive impacts in our world, in our country, and in our community. Just know that these people are heroes for the work that they did, and you can also be a hero in trying to make our world, our community, a better place. So don't forget about that. You can make a positive change. Well, I hope you have an amazing weekend. I will see you Monday for Monday's Read Aloud.